Have you ever had one of those projects that you started but you just never quite finished? And here's one of mine. I built a swing about a year ago for my wife, and as I was finishing it up, she asked if I would turn it into a glider. And I told her of course I would. And then it sat in our garage for just over a year. So you know what? I'm gonna get this thing done. So let me show you how I'm gonna turn a swing into a glider. And just a reminder, this was built out of pallet wood. That's why there's some extra holes here and there. Now if you're going to be converting a swing into a glider or just building a glider, I would suggest first finding the actual hardware. These are the swings that you can use to make a glider. Now it's a little hard to see, but these are offset a little bit. That is so one side can attach to your base and one side can attach to your swing and they don't interfere with each other. So I'd suggest finding those first. I'll put a link to these in the description just in case you're interested. Now the first thing we need to build is the base, and to do that I'm going to be using some leftover 2x6s from a previous project. Now these are pressure treated, and that has to be that way because these will be in contact with the ground and you don't want them to rot away. Now the full depth of our swing is about 24 inches including the backrest, so that's how big we're going to build the base. Now just one piece by itself is not tall enough, so I'm actually going to double this up. But using 2 full lengths of wood, well, that just seems like a waste of wood to me. So I have a little bit of leftover from what I cut off of, and I think I'm going to create some feet with it, about like so, to get this up higher and use less wood. Now to attach these together, I'm just going to use some type 3 waterproof glue, but also I'm going to put some pocket screws in here just to give it some additional strength. Now as I'm trying to install these screws, the wood keeps moving around on me, so I've had to clamp them together and down to the table. Now the bases feel plenty strong, but because they are just in a rectangle shape, they do look a little boxy. So I think I'm going to go in a couple inches on each side and cut a 45-degree angle. I think that'll just look better. Now doesn't that look a little bit better? Now with the base feet done, I need a couple boards that connect these two together to give them strength. So I need to measure out the base of the swing. Now the width of our swing is right about 48 inches. But we also have to take in consideration the width of our brackets that we've purchased. These are 1.25 to 1.5 inches. I'm going to add some washer, so we'll say 1.5 inches. And so we got to subtract that from each side. So if it's 48 inches, we need to subtract 1.5 inches and 1.5 inches, so 45 inches is the width of the boards we need. Now I've laid everything out in an upside down fashion so it's a little bit easier to add the screws. Now since I'm going to be screwing into end grain here, instead of me going straight across, I'm going to take it at a slight angle here, and that'll hopefully go across the fibers and give it some strength. I'm also going to pre-drill both of these since they're so close to the edge I don't want to take a chance on cracking. Now I just wanted to show you that this frame is a little bit warped, but 2 things to keep in mind. First, once there's some weight on this, some of that warp will disappear. Also, where we plan on putting this, whether it's on the ground or whether it's on a deck, there's a very good chance that the surface it's going to be on is not going to be level anyway. Now if it ends up being too bad, I can always put some shims or some spacers underneath one of these corners to level it out, but for now, I'm going to live with it. With the base pretty much done, we need to look back at the swing. We need to create a frame that stretches off the side of the swing down to about a foot below its actual bottom. And that'll allow the brackets to hook up and allow the swing to actually go back and forth. Now after doing a bunch of measurements, I have a feeling this is going to be the setup that works well. Now I have 2 boards here on the ends that are 24.5 inches. I do have a 5-degree cut down here on the base. And then the board that goes across the bottom is 11.5 inches with also 5 degrees. So it kind of turns it into almost like an A-frame type shape, which I'm hoping will give it a lot of strength. Now to hold this together at the bottom, I'm going to use a little bit of glue and some pocket screws, and that should hold this nice and tight. And then I build a second one for the other side. I decided to move the frame and the swing on top of my workbench because I'm not sure about you, but I like to work at things at about arm level versus trying to crawl around on the floor and take measurements and make cuts. So we're going to give this a shot. Now if we were to attach the legs as is, I'll put it in place there, you'll see that it actually hangs too far low and it'll hit the ground. But we have to take in consideration that we have to lift the swing up a little bit so it is off the frame. So hopefully, if I calculated everything correctly, once we do that, The legs should be just high enough to clear the ground and the swing high enough to clear the frame. Another thing we need to take into consideration is how level the swing is, or how unlevel we want it to be. If it's perfectly level, it might feel okay, but if we're able to lean it back maybe like 5 degrees or so, I have a feeling that will feel a lot more relaxing. Now we want the side frames to fit right up under the armrests. And if I put it in position here, at least the front one, you'll notice that the back one is way off. That's because we have the swing tilted at 5 degrees and these arms are at 5 degrees. So this is at 10 degrees, it's too far leaning inward. So we're gonna have to make a mark and then make a cut. And it should fit in there about like so. Now if by chance you are doing this project and you're modifying a current swing, there's always a chance you may have to modify parts of the armrest. For example, this support bar here, I'm going to have to remove it completely. So I've taken a bunch of measurements of exactly where this armrest is currently, and then when I have the new side frame in place, I can make sure that goes exactly back in position. Now position the outer frame into place and I have clamped it so nothing moves around. Now I'm going to drill a hole and install some long bolts so it holds everything together. And now with both the bolts in, all I have to do is go back, reattach the armrest, and this side will be done. Now with the frame all put together, we need to add the bracketry or the hangers for the actual glider. And to do that, I have raised up the side frame here 1 inch with these little blocks so it doesn't drag on the ground. Now to add these brackets, I do need to be very careful that I don't overshoot where the holes are. The holes are roughly 7.5 inches apart, and so I need to start this down low and make sure that I don't overshoot the frame behind it. In other words, if I had it way up here, it wouldn't even hit the frame. So we need to do this one low, and this one will be high. Now I'm going to drill a little pilot hole through the frame here, and I'll position the base frame behind exactly where I want it. And I'm just going to use this 1/16 of an inch bit to just barely bump that back frame, and that way I'll know exactly where to start my measurement to go up 7.5 inches. It's a little hard to see, but the hole is right there. Now the bolts I'm going to be using for this setup here are 1/4 inch, so we're going to use a 1/4 inch bit to drill the rest of this out. Now to get a quick measurement, I've made sure that the frame is sitting flat on the table, and I'm using a speed square so I can measure up 7.5 inches. Now fortunately, our mark that we drilled is right at 1 3/4, so we'll just add 7.5 to that, and then we can make a mark. Now that I have all these holes drilled, I'm going to go to the other side, drill all those before I add any of the bracketry, just to make sure everything stays nice and level. Now that I have all the holes in place, I'm going to start with the top bracket on the bottom frame first, because I have a feeling it'll be easier to install this one and then lift up this outer frame into position instead of trying to hook the bottom one first and then reach your hand into a little tiny crack to try and connect the top one. Now I'm going to use a combination of a small washer and a large washer here so that it provides as much surface area as possible on the wood. Now let's see how well this works. Oh yeah! Awesome! Now I gotta get this heavy thing on the ground. Oh boy. Alright, for the first test, there's still a little bit of wobble in it from that warp. I'll probably have to shim it up. But overall it's smooth. If you like this type of project, please let me know in the comments. Otherwise, have fun building.